everyone, and welcome to today's town hall featuring the state of Ohio. I am Sarah Falvo, Director of Community at the Arcview Group. Before we start, I just want to give a quick thank you to our alliance partners, Dwayne Morris, Green Growth CPA, Alpha Root, GrowFlow, Work, Ice Miller, who will be participating on this panel, and Zuber Lawler. So the recent news from Ohio indicates that the Buckeye State's cannabis industry is on the brink of something big. Adult use legislation was introduced to the state Senate last month, while another bill is taking shape and will expand and streamline their medical program. On today's town hall, we will discuss what is on the horizon in Ohio with our industry experts. And today's webinar will actually be Arcview's 9th town hall. These town hall programs are a great way for investors, job seekers, advocates, and those who are just curious about cannabis in different states to learn and connect. A little bit about the Arcview Group. We are an unparalleled ecosystem that enables companies, investors, partners, and leaders to leverage opportunities, address business challenges, and mitigate risk. We have the expertise, services, and research that you need to achieve your goals. Our various business units are comprised of our consulting division, our member-managed collective fund, and our FINRA licensed broker-dealer. Additionally, we have ways to participate in our Arcview community through things such as our Women's Inclusion Network, which is composed of over 200 women across all verticals of the industry. We are also launching a holiday shopping guide later today, featuring a number of our female founder companies. You can find more information about all of our business units and upcoming programs at arcviewgroup.com. And don't forget to check us out on social media. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. So with that, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce the CEO of the Arcview Group, Jeff Finkel. Come on screen, Jeff.
Thank you, Sarah. You know, as I always say, you truly have one of the best broadcast voices in our industry. You're very easy to listen to, and I appreciate you hosting for us today.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that.
So welcome, everybody, to our Ohio Town Hall. You know, as I've said before, I'm a real fan of this town hall programming. I think it's really the only nationally broadcast series of webinars that takes a deep dive into the current state of business in regional cannabis markets. We all know that business dynamics that are present in one region aren't necessarily present in another, which is why I think our viewers find real value in this program. So today, with our knowledgeable panel, we'll explore this and other dynamics of the Ohio effort. Before we begin our programming, though, I would like to say that I'm sorry to the Ohio viewers for the Ohio State Buckeyes loss to the University of Michigan Wolverines this past weekend, and I acknowledge that I'm a Wolverine fan that bleeds blue, so please don't hold it against me. All right. Let's first get started with a high-level overview of the Ohio medical market from Hoodie Analytics. And what we'll do after that is we'll move to our panel discussion with Chris Lindsay from MPP, pinch hitting for Stephen Hawkins, who's under the weather today, and Sam Porter from Ice Miller. And then we'll add into the discussion Erin Gore from the Garden Society. So let me start by welcoming to our stage the amazing Kelly Bernaza Hall, Senior Vice President of Hoodie Analytics, to give us some facts and statistics about the Buckeye State. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, Jeffrey. Nice to meet you. Good to speak with everyone. Thank you for including me today.
You bet. So I think your deck includes an intro of Hoodie. So, right, Kelly? So let's just get to it. Intro Hoodie, and tell us about the key stats of the current Ohio medical market. You know, category growth, top brands, average price, promotional activity. You track all that. And what residents of Ohio and the legislators should consider as they prepare to go rec.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you for having me. I will keep this short and sweet. I know that there's a lot of great discussion to be had today. Again, I'm Kelly Bernaza Hall, Senior Vice President, Customer Service at Hoodie Analytics. Been doing analytics and insights for over 17 years now. Started in CPG, but of course, I'm in cannabis now. My time in cannabis really started working with MSOs directly and helping them make sense of all the data that they had in-house and helping them pull all the great insights they can get out of it to make better decisions. And now with the Hoodie Analytics suite of services that you'll be able to see a little bit of a preview today, we really can go one step further and you can get a view of the entire marketplace itself. So Hoodie Analytics, just to give you a little bit of a background, so you know exactly where this data is coming from, is a suite of services that we provide our clients to allow all of our clients to get information on assortment, stocking status, pricing, promotion every day. You can think of us as every product, every dispensary, every state, every day. Now, we're not the only ones that provide a marketplace view, but we are the only ones that can provide next day information, up to date, current, with the best coverage around in any state that cannabis is legal. The entire data that we have, it really funds the easy application suite of services that we offer our clients. It's used by dispensaries, investors, brands, MSOs. Our marketplace intelligence wholesale management systems available right now on your desktop laptop, but will be coming in a mobile app very shortly in the next month. It really gives our clients the ability to understand what are marketplace trends, dispensary analytics like stocking status, assortment, pricing, promotion, as well as understand brand growth, brand development. We've got our store product locator that again can be used by brands and MSOs to allow their customers to easily find the products that they want without having to surf a whole bunch of different menus. So we took all the data that we had, we took a quick look, deep dive into Ohio to pull out the key information that would probably be most useful for you guys to know about the current state of affairs in Ohio, and also some information that you might want to consider, again, as Ohio considers moving to adult use. So let's get into Ohio. Looking at the current state here, this projected to have $400 million in sales for 2021. Ohio currently has around 55 licensed dispensaries, and the average store has around 330 products, give or take. The average price per gram for flower, just as a point of reference, is around $20. Now you can see in the chart up top, from a distribution perspective, the top 8 brands here, Buckeye Relief, Fireland Scientific leading the charge. Most of the brands in the top count are going to be local Ohio-based companies. And then because we've got the most recent information, and we took a look at Thanksgiving weekend just to see what kind of promotional activity was going on in the marketplace in Ohio last week. You can see there's a wide variety of promotional activity out there. Most stores had some sort of promotional activity. About a third of the products in the stores were on promotion, and around 25% average discount level. Now, throughout the whole entire month of November, for a point of comparison, similar amount of stores having promotions, but certainly the amount of products on promotion and the depth of discount was a little bit higher, as you would expect, over the Thanksgiving weekend. So that's the current state of affairs of Ohio, but the question could be, well, how does that really compare? So we take a quick look to compare some of these stats against Pennsylvania, which of course is a medical state, and Michigan, which is adult use, very close to Ohio, share some borders. The headlines here: Ohio, generally speaking, has fewer dispensaries per capita, has slightly smaller assortments compared to both of those states, and has a slightly more expensive product. So if we compare, for example, compared to Pennsylvania, the number of dispensaries, Ohio has about half of the count of dispensaries per capita that Pennsylvania does. If we compare the average number of products per store versus Michigan versus Pennsylvania, it's around 75–80% of the assortment size in Ohio versus the other 2 states. And interestingly, the price of flower is a little bit more expensive in Ohio. So in Pennsylvania, it's around $16, and in Michigan, it's around $13. So I bring all of that up because as we think about Ohio moving into adult use, we know from experience looking at what happened in Michigan and Illinois and other states that went adult use, there is generally a spike in demand. There's generally a lot of interest and activity around it. And so making sure you've got the right availability from dispensary locations, the right product amount of product available in stores, and the right mix of products will all be really important for Ohio to nail in order for the supply to meet that demand you would expect to see coming. As we think about the assortment mix itself, here looking at the current assortment mix from an item share perspective for Ohio versus the medical market versus adult use, you can see that it generally bodes well for Ohio that it's got a mix that's very similar to what we typically see adult use to look like as well. So the actual mix, while the count of products might be smaller, the actual mix looks relatively appropriate for an adult use market, where you can see flower and vape course, it doesn't matter if it's medical or adult use, are going to be the most popular or most important products to have available. But in adult use markets, you do tend to see more of an assortment of edibles in those markets. And there's lots of different varieties of reasons for that. But one of the big ones, especially at the beginning of being adult use, is adult use. A lot of adult use customers are entering the cannabis market for the first time, having something that's less intimidating and also a friendlier price point, shall we say, can be a really nice entry point in for consumers who are looking for that first experience and for it to go well. So the assortment mix that we see within Ohio does seem to mirror well already what the adult use market tends to look like. But as we think about adult use, we want to think about new opportunities. What else might be on the box that we want to think about? More dispensaries, increased competition, of course, right? So it's all going to be about location. Certainly, you would expect to see more densely populated areas have more competition with more dispensaries pop up. But as Ohio does border a number of states that don't currently have adult use, you might also expect to see some pockets of competition around state borders as well to capture folks that might be interested in visiting Ohio from other states. Leads to the next point, new customers, new demands. Adult use customers, of course, will be a brand new segment of the population that you'll be addressing and working with directly. They'll have their own dynamics, their own needs and wants. And of course, as I just mentioned, there'll be some nuances, especially at the beginning, with having friendly price points, having less intimidating products for them to enter into. But you're also to think about out-of-state residents coming to visit. As a point of comparison in Illinois, as they have moved to adult use, we know that a significant amount of revenue in Illinois, up to roughly 30%, is considered coming from out-of-state visitors and purchasing. All of that means getting the assortment mix, getting the assortment amount, and getting the price points will be really important to both meet the demand that we expect to see and to have people continually be pleased with their experience within the Ohio adult use market. Obviously, we expect to see increased demand as the markets open up to adult use. Having that right assortment mix between all the different categories and having the right price points in place will be really important to win in the Ohio market going forward. So that was a very, very quick overview. I tried to keep that as close to 5 minutes as possible. Please reach out to me if you have any questions at all. Happy to go and further talk to you about Ohio. Happy to demo some of the tools and the dashboards that we've got. See my email here, kelly@hoodieanalytics.com. But otherwise, I will pass it back to the team.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. That's good stuff. I guess the one thing I'm surprised at, and that's not an Ohio issue, is just the relatively small percentage pre-rolls are against regular flower. I just would expect that to be higher and probably would expect that to grow over time.
Yeah, so I think well, in Ohio in particular, there's some regulations on the pre-roll sector, sure. But correct, yes, it is flower is king, if you will, across all the different. Yep.
Terrific. Good stuff. Thank you so much. I think we're going to post a quick survey now. For those of you who are viewers, this is important to us for you to fill out. It's important to us just so that we work really hard at putting these webinars together. We want them to be topical. We want to feature information that's important to you, so we want to collect your interests. So please take a moment to fill out the poll so we can continually refine what we do here. Thank you so much. All right. Let's move on to the panel portion of today's program so we can learn about the political, the regulatory, and business environment in Ohio. I want to start by introducing Chris Lindsay and Sam Porter. We're going to spend some time with the two of you, and then we're going to add the fabulous Erin Gore. Now, at the end, time permitting, I'll pose some questions to the entire group, and maybe we'll even give a chance for some of our viewers to ask questions. So, Chris, let me give a proper intro for you. Chris Lindsay serves as the Director of Government Relations of the Marijuana Policy Project and VP of Policy at the U.S. Cannabis Council. Chris joined MPP in 2013, prior to which he was a criminal defense attorney and civil litigator in the state of Montana and a cannabis activist and lobbyist. In 2009, with several partners, Chris started one of the largest cannabis medical providers in Montana, which was raided as law enforcement authorities swept the state. And Chris was charged as a co-conspirator and became a federal felon, a journey I'm sure he did not expect when he graduated law school. Welcome, Chris. Let me also introduce Sam Porter. Sam serves as senior counsel in Ice Miller's public affairs and gaming practice. His background combines public service, government counsel, liquor control, and gaming compliance. Prior to Ice Miller, he was regional director of compliance for Penn National Gaming in Columbus, Ohio. He was also the executive director of the Ohio Liquor Control Commission, where he provided counsel on all legal policy matters involving liquor and gaming. Sam also served as the assistant chief counsel for the Office of Governor John Kasich, providing legal counsel to the governor and senior staff, where he reviewed and made recommendations on clemency and death penalty decisions for the governor. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you.
All right, Chris, maybe let's start by having you give sort of a high-level sort of overview of the Marijuana Policy Project.
Sure. So, and thank you very much for having me here. Marijuana Policy Project has been out in the field for many years. I think they go back even to 1995. Their mission is to change laws at the state and really at the federal level as well. And so they do that through the legislative process and also through the ballot initiative process. Ballot initiative, we hear about those a lot, especially during that season. I think last year it was South Dakota and Montana. I think that next year we're going to see Missouri and Ohio. So these are constantly, getting put up and often during the presidential elections in particular. The other area that we work on is legislative work, and that's where I came up through, and that's just straight lobbying. I've been involved in a lot of different states. Illinois was kind of the feather in my cap. I was involved in decriminalization, in medical cannabis, and then most recently in full legalization. So that was a great experience. So MPP is out there doing it in a lot of the different states, and is also become a founding member of the U.S. Cannabis Council, where I am on loan and serve as part of the GR team there as well. So thanks again for having me.
Well, Chris, thank you for all you do, and thank you on behalf of the Marijuana Policy Project for all it does as well. Sam, thank you for being here. Tell us a little bit about Ice Miller's practices, and especially your presence in Ohio and the work you're doing as it pertains to cannabis.
Sure, absolutely. Pleasure to be here. And wow, Chris, that's a fascinating background, especially some amazing experiences to have quite out of law school that I'm sure you weren't anticipating, but glad it's behind you. Pleasure to be here. Ice Miller is a full service law firm. We are in multiple states across the Midwest. For our practice in the public affairs, my focus is on cannabis, gaming, and liquor. I'd like to change my practice to Vice Miller to go along with the name of the firm, but that might be a little challenging to do. But representing clients in all facets of cannabis, we represent multi-state operators. We represent the quote mom and pop operators, and to be honest, Ohio, it's really new right now. We've almost reached the 5-year mark. So we're seeing a lot of growth in the state. We're seeing a lot of changes that are happening, not only with the regulations that are written, but also with the legislature, which we'll get into here in a moment. Jeff, you had asked, what has been my involvement with cannabis when it comes to the changing of the landscape with the regulations, with the legislature. Sarah had opened it up and said, we're on the brink of something big in Ohio, and there is just a lot that's going on in Ohio right now. One of the things that we're proud of that we were able to accomplish this summer is that we saw that cannabis operators weren't being treated fairly when it came to other businesses in Ohio. And specifically, it was around, we saw dispensaries. And these local jurisdictions were almost creating their own regs outside of the state statute through their city ordinances that would further regulate these entities. And examples that we saw were dispensary licensing fees that were just exorbitant, or other ordinances that would require 1.5% gross sales off the top. at certain levels. And for some of these operators, those were just exorbitant fees. And we were successful in actually getting the law changed this summer through the ballot bill. So a big success, not only for the client, but for the state of Ohio and then other operators who are operating in these other municipalities. Chris had also mentioned ballot initiatives, and our firm is at the forefront right now with an Ohio ballot initiative for recreational marijuana. And it's a statutory ballot initiative. And for those who aren't lawyers out there, really what that means is we're making a change to the state statute. And it's different from a constitutional ballot initiative that you might see, which is the Constitution. And the reason for doing such, there's a myriad of reasons, but one, it means you need less signatures to gather. And you don't get quite as beat up in the media or on the editorial boards as well if you're changing the Constitution. But basically, the way the process works is that we had drafted a state statute that really covers all areas of adult recreation. You've got to get past the Attorney General's office review. You've got to get past a ballot board review. And then you take this ballot initiative, you go and you collect 132,000 signatures, and you go to the General Assembly and you say, hey, look, this is what the people want. Is this something you're willing to accept? And if they say yes, then it gets signed into law and it's a success. But if they say no, you go back and you collect 132,000 more signatures, and then you are on the ballot. So that's just kind of the way the ballot initiative process works in Ohio. Where we are right now is we're about to present to the General Assembly, and we're pretty excited about that and to see what happens. But Jeff, do you want me to get into any of the particulars of the recreational ballot?
Well, let's. I just, it's really interesting to me. Before we do that, I didn't really know this before I started to prepare for this panel, but Ohio really has a long history of supporting cannabis reform. 1975, then Governor James Rhode, Republican governor, right, decriminalized possession of cannabis up to 200 grams. At the time, only one of 6 states to do so. 2016, I would say in the early part of medical reform, Governor John Kasich, another Republican, signed House Bill 523 to legalize medical use of cannabis in Ohio. The bill was sponsored by Representative Stephen Huffman, yes, another Republican. And then in October, right, which is sort of this, the reason we're doing this today, and I wonder if it was a surprise to any of our panelists or listeners, Republican Representative James Callender and Ron Ferguson announced the bill that would create the commercial infrastructure for adult use, jumping ahead of Democratic reform. So either of you guys, what's going on in Ohio with all this Republican support? It's kind of uncommon.
I'll go real quick, and then I don't want to monopolize, but having worked for Governor Kasich at a high level, just to be clear, it was something that he sort of inherited when he started. And Ohio is a super majority Republican House and Senate, and you've got the governor. And there are cannabis bills that come out of the Democrat side, but to be honest, those just really aren't going to move. But some of the bills that you're seeing right now you're right, they're listening to the constituency, but also some of these are cleanup as well. So Senate Bill 261, which is Huffman's bill, is a big cleanup portion from his prior legislation that he sponsored. And then Representative Callender's is a fascinating piece as well that actually closely mirrors our ballot initiative. But Chris, happy to get your perspective.
Well, yeah, and I would just to add that even when it gets to like HB 523, which was the bill that brought us medical cannabis in Ohio, that wasn't altruistic on the part of lawmakers. They saw that there was a successful voter drive and wanted to get ahead of it and say, well, you know what, we would rather have a say in how this thing works than to leave it to voters entirely. So, but you know what, I noticed that there was a poll that got some press not too long ago, just a few weeks ago, that showed there was stronger support amongst Republican voters in Ohio than among Democratic voters. And I thought that was pretty interesting as well. So can't explain that.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Chris, let's stay with you for a minute. What is MPP doing to help advance cannabis reform and legalization in Ohio? And how can others support the efforts of MPP and their allies?
Right. So we are supportive of the drive that Sam mentioned and are happy to contribute to that. As I think, we know it's possible the measure that has been put forth by lawmakers may be another effort to try to get ahead of a voter initiative, and so hopefully that's a positive and not a negative. So we're happy to be supportive and play a role there. It's not a state we're taking a lead role in. That just varies from state to state, but happy to be supportive here.
Great, great. Sam, so cannabis is currently regulated by the State of Ohio Board of Pharmacy, right? Contemplating adult use, who do you think will regulate it, and how will they take over regulatory oversight for medical, or will they?
So what's something that's unique about Ohio is actually the whole marijuana industry is regulated by 3 distinct operators. So the Ohio Department of Commerce, they regulate the cultivators and the processors and the labs. It's the Board of Pharmacy that regulates the dispensaries, your patient and caregivers, as well as new forms and methods of medical marijuana. And why not add in a third? There's the medical board, and then they oversee the physicians who recommend, and then new qualifying conditions as well. So you bring up a great point. Ohio, the operators feel as though there's inefficiencies. We shouldn't have 3 separate bodies who are regulating this field. And the effort right now through Senate Bill 261, which is Senator Huffman's bill, and through the Ballot Initiative, and I believe Representative Callender's, it's to consolidate this regulatory body into the Department of Commerce and to create a division of cannabis control or division of marijuana. And the thought is this is going to create better efficiencies. They're going to be more effective, and you've got a more streamlined voice. We have seen in Ohio that with our dispensaries, if you want a piece of an advertising that's approved by the state, you submit through an e-licensing portal that goes to the Department of Commerce, and then it's also reviewed and approved by the pharmacy board. Well, one may approve it and one may not, and you're kind of left with your bag of sand here and wondering, well, what am I supposed to do with this? So I think it will create a lot more efficiencies down the line, and then they have a singular voice that constituents can go to and can raise.
California went through something similar where they just consolidated their regulatory structure. Anything that can be learned from them?
I'm not familiar with the consolidation efforts in California.
I'm not either, but I'm happy to chime in that what happens, and this happened in Illinois as well, there's a tendency when especially in the legislative conversation to say, well, we understand the need for a regulatory system, but you know what, we regulate all kinds of things already, and we don't want to grow government. So we're going to use our existing agencies. And that's what kind of happened in the case of Ohio, where you divide it up, and now you've got to talk to all these different agencies, and there's no one single place to go. And I think we've seen similar problems in other states where they didn't have that centralization.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So a question for both of you, and I know this is always a hot topic among our listeners, I think the industry in general. What provisions could Ohio include in cannabis reform policies to encourage an equitable and diverse legal cannabis market? Social equity is important. Right.
There's an increasingly broad array of tools that can be brought to bear. I happen to be involved in Illinois, so that's the one that I just kind of know off the top of my head. And I would say that it probably reflects where most states are going to be, which is at the moment when you're ready to pass your law, you do the best negotiation you can with all of the different stakeholders, and you look at where is the highest bar right now on this issue, and you incorporate it, right? And then more lessons are learned in the next state. So Illinois, at the time that it passed, I think was probably a high water mark. I think probably by now we know more. And so, there are many lessons, and they can be incorporated at different places along the entire regulatory scheme. So, for instance, everybody gravitates to who gets the licenses. There are other things that can happen that really speak to things like equity that aren't only about that issue. And I'll admit that's probably the top of the list for a lot of folks, and it's going to be part of the mix in any jurisdiction. But there's a lot more that can be done. And I would point to things like the fund that was made available in Illinois before licenses started to get issued, so that you have new entrants into the market who aren't coming in after the ground floor is already occupied, if that makes sense. So having a system in place so that you have a fund for your equity applicants at the point at which they need it as the market's taking off, that's not easy to do, but it's necessary if you want it to be meaningful, because great if you can get the license, but look, if the market's already established, it's hard to participate. So that's one thing. There are many examples. We could talk about expungement. We could talk about ways to get funds to communities. These are all really beneficial things that we know work. They're not as controversial as who gets the licenses, and you're a lot less likely to get sued as a state when you start going down a lot of those paths. So there is a wide range, and I definitely hope that the folks involved in that conversation in Ohio have a chance to do that survey and look at what's around and talk to the groups that are in this, because there are a lot of really smart groups that have been involved in the equity discussion for a while, and they've got a lot of good lessons.
Sam, anything to add there?
Yeah. So bad news for folks in Ohio. When it comes to prescribing licenses for social equity, that was struck down and declared unconstitutional in Ohio. So there was a law that required that 15% of all licenses to grow, process, test, or sell would be awarded to economically disadvantaged individuals. That was defined in the code. Well, what happened is that there were 12 cultivator licenses that were up for grabs, and two of those two applicants were awarded licenses under that social equity piece, even though they scored lower than other applicants. So the individuals who lost, understandably, they sued, and the issue went to court. The court found that the 15% set aside was insignificant, and the burden was too excessive for newly created industries with these limited participants. So, while minority set-asides have been upheld by the courts, in Ohio, there was really no documented evidence of discrimination in the industry that was narrowly tailored to increase participation. And basically, it's because medical marijuana, the program was so new in Ohio, so there was no history of discrimination. The state went ahead and they argued, here are reports of African Americans and Latinos that have been arrested for marijuana crimes at high rates. But the judge said, that's just not enough to prove discrimination across several racial groups in this new industry. And what the judge said is that if the legislator wanted those that were convicted of marijuana crimes to have preference, then it should have been written as such. So you need to be careful when laws are written in Ohio. If you're, what you want to do is give preference, use different types of words rather than being overly prescriptive and say that they must and they shall. One of the things that we worked on in Ohio is we have a MBE program, Minority Business Enterprise and Set Aside, and to mirror sort of the social equity allocation and the benefits. Use something that's around in Ohio and to mirror that program and to bring in, and to study a lot of the concepts that Chris had shared. So that's sort of a dark spot in Ohio right now. We've been around 5 years. Would it work? I don't know. Probably not long enough.
And I'd be very, very curious. So Samuel, when Illinois went down that path, it had the benefit of that case that you mentioned in Ohio. Yeah. And there was great effort taken to try to sort of work around that. And so you won't see race mentioned in the law. What you see is individuals who have been disproportionately impacted, right? And that's sort of become the standard, the de facto standard, because it seems to survive these kinds of challenges. My question, Jeff, if you don't mind, if we go down the rabbit hole just for a bit here, do you think that even that is not going to pass muster in Ohio, or do you think that we could see some kind of standard like that emerge?
You know, it all depends on how it's written, and it always depends on who gets offended by it and who loses out. You know, I think that's, you know, the best you can do, as you said, is to carve around it. You know, what is constitutional, what is legal, and we saw the NDE program as something that has already passed the test. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to be as conservative as possible. And so that's why we modeled it off of that, because that's the last thing you want to do, is you want to put something in there that's just going to, you know, string out the licensing process and delay further, cannabis in Ohio. And but no, I think that the points that you raised are certainly valid.
Let me. I don't want to shut the topic off, by the way, but I just want to add my good friend Erin Gore in. Erin, join our stage and do a quick intro. We can pick up on your comments too. Oh, look at that. We got the Badger hat. Okay, Chris, we'll come back to 1 second on that, but let me just quickly introduce Erin. Erin is the founder CEO of Garden Society. For those of you who don't know her, Erin started Garden Society in early 2016 to bring high-quality, beautiful cannabis wellness products to women looking for relief from day-to-day stress and pain and a little extra joy. She studied chemical and biological engineering from the University, you guessed it, of Wisconsin. Go Badgers. She began a decade-long career at Henkel, where she managed a global adhesive business valued at over $100 million and earned her Lean Six Sigma Black Belt from the American Society of Quality. Pretty impressive. She's also a co-founder of the Gore Family Vineyards. Welcome, Erin. Before I ask you a question, I will let Chris or Sam just close the topic about social equity. Any final comments, guys, on that?
I just had one.
Forever on that topic.
Yeah, just to set up a question. The answer to how do we get to this issue of race and licenses is to get real good studies. And I think, Sam, that it's possible that one or more of the corrective measures that you mentioned in Ohio may include some of that stuff. So I wondered if you were able to speak to any of that.
You know, I don't have any research.
Okay. And I mentioned it just because I heard that studies may be part of some of that work. And if so, that does resolve one of the major issues we were kind of discussing. So happy to hand the mic back to you.
All right. So Erin, welcome. You know, why don't you just take a minute, add to my intro if you'd like to, or at least just describe in better detail what Garden Society is today.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having us. Mic check, you can hear me, right?
Yep.
Everything's clear? Okay, great. I'm actually sitting in Ohio. I'm sitting in Westlake, outside of Cleveland. So I really enjoyed the social equity conversation and learned a lot. So thanks, Sam and Chris, both for that. Garden Society is a vertically integrated operator in California. We launched in the medical market of California. We started making products for women, AKA myself, and Self-Need, my co-founder, Carly. We've quickly evolved and grown. We've had a very interesting journey, I think, as any diverse founder, Black, brown, woman, otherwise, LGBTQ, veteran, understands it's very hard to raise capital. So we've taken a really creative approach, and we're really proud and grateful to have Arcview on our cap table. Thank you, Jeff and Jean. As we look to continue, growing from 2016 to today, we've made a few pivots. We were for women. We found out 67% of our customers are men. So we really focus on quality products. We're in wine country. We live that wine country lifestyle, and we want to bring that sense of place to our customer. We're vertically integrated. We make our own products. So we're an operator, we're a license holder. We're not just a women-owned brand. So I think that's a distinct difference in us. And as we were looking to expand outside of California, we took, I guess, the traditional approach of being a brand and looking at licensing our technology, our IP, our brand to multi-state operators operating in different states. And I spent about 9 months exploring this journey and realized one distinction we have is that we are an operator. We have a lot of technology and IP. And then another distinction we have is we really lead with our values. And we're taking a different approach to expansion in that we're leading with an operator-led strategy. So we're actually partners in a license in Ohio now. We're taking it into certificate of occupancy, taking it over, and we're going to be upstarting Garden Society in Ohio in early 2022, which we're really excited for.
Well, Erin, you are really good at manufacturing, really good at doing it at scale. But, I'm curious, why Ohio, right? I've seen, it's not negative to Ohio, but it's just not sort of intuitively the first place you would think a California operator would expand. Michigan, Illinois, Massachusetts. Why Ohio? What's
well, first of all,
about the Ohio
Wisconsin doesn't have legal weed yet, so problem one. No, I'm just kidding. What? There's a couple.
That doesn't stop people from consuming, though.
No, it doesn't. There's a couple things that I thought were super interesting about the Ohio market. The first off, it was a very new market. Being in California, that's a very mature market. Understanding Illinois and Michigan and the landscape there. There's a lot of opportunity in Ohio. It's still very small. It's under the radar. It's a very good market when you look at the revenue per store and the patient base and the average cart size, and you look at the unit economics behind the market. And it was opportunistic. We found a really great partner in Ohio. So it was that combination of the right market, the newness of the market, and then the opportunistic of the partners.
And what about structure? Most brand expansions end up being a license deal. You create, the scope of work and, the product SOPs, and you enter into a licensing agreement. But you're taking more of an innovative approach. You're kind of expanding as an operator. How did you think about that? And what do you think sort of the risks and rewards are? Is this just, a way to leverage your unique skill set? I mean, how did you think about it?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question and something that took us a while to get to where we are. When we looked at licensing, at Garden Society, we make gourmet chocolates. We have chocolatiers from wine country, bean to bar, full spectrum. They're gorgeous cannabis. People love the effect they give them and the consistency. So we have chocolates. We have new fast-acting wine country gummies that we make the nanotechnology ourselves. We have pre-rolls. We have hash. So we have all these different form factors. And when we looked at licensing the brand, we realized the quantity of trade secrets we were going to be giving that MSO and the requirements there. And so that was one path. But then we also were really concerned around quality assurance and quality control. How do we do it in a market with somebody else that, quite frankly, doesn't really know what they're doing, and ensure that quality consumer experience is there that protects our brand integrity and our brand value, right? And so the more we started to unpack this, the more conversations we started to have, we realized that people either wanted our technology and they didn't care about our brand, or they wanted us to teach them how to do it and they didn't really care about Garden Society, or we couldn't quite get the right fit. So what we decided is, as being an operator in California, not only do we have Garden Society, we do a lot of mentoring of Black women founders who are launching their brands. We do contract manufacturing for other brands in California. So we have multiple revenue channels. And if you look at the amount of capital required to launch your brand in a new state versus the licensing fee potential back to you, versus if you're an operator, and all of a sudden you can bring your values to that, so you can ensure the quality is there, but also you can pull other brands with you. We can be a contract manufacturer. We can be an ally to Black and brown owned equity brands from California to help them expand. There is a lot of upside potential. And the reality is we already had the infrastructure and the know-how and the SOPs and the trade secrets and the technology. So now it's about templatizing and recreating, understanding local regulations, finding local partners, but like, how do we leverage our brain power and do what we do in Cali and take it to a new market and lead with the values and the quality that has allowed us to thrive in California. I think it's really interesting looking at the California market around diverse brands. It's such an MSO-dominated marketplace that there's this huge opportunity to really bring in some diversity of products into the marketplace. Really like being a good ally and working with the people we do in California or in Ohio, and looking at really being a manufacturer partner to those who can start to bring their products to market in a scaled way, in addition to obviously our own brand and our own products, first and foremost.
Great. So maybe this is a question for all of you. Maybe describe like the white spaces in the Ohio market, MSO penetration, what's kind of going on there now, what we expect. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I'm really excited because there's not a lot of craft manufacturers in the space. So somebody leading with quality, leading with innovation, fast-acting technology. There's some incredible local Ohio brands that I really respect, and there's a lot of open space to really create and innovate, which is really exciting from my chair anyway. Pre-rolls aren't allowed in Ohio. There's some quirky regulations. California, we're very blessed because we can basically do anything. So, there's some progression that I think will happen with the adult use market once it starts. But in the meantime, there's still a huge amount of opportunity in product innovation and product quality. And I think the consumer is really looking for those quality-based products. You can see it with flower and the tiering, and they're clearing that out finally. And so I think there's a ton of opportunity in the product side.
Okay. Interesting to me because your pre-roll is what you do with great efficiency and scale.
Yeah, It was definitely a trip to think about going into a market without pre-rolls, for sure. Because we make a lot of pre-rolls. Just for context, we make 7,000 to 9,000 pre-rolls a night. So we run 2 shifts. We make gummies by day and pre-rolls by night. So that was definitely interesting. But I think, quality products are quality products, whether it's a pre-roll, a gummy, a vape, tincture, quality assurance is the same. It's just different form factors. And so how you do that with a consistent experience with quality is a real opportunity for the Ohio market, especially because it's so MSO dominated. And so I also think, just to chime in, Chris and Sam, I'm sure have something to share, but I also think the diverse and values forward operator is a real opportunity in this state. Really leading with like Black-owned brands and really driving diversity for consumers is a real opportunity done the right way from a place of allyship.
Yeah, great. So another question for you all. Adult rec, what are the chances it passes? And if it does, when? And then more importantly, if it does, how long before the rules get established? Like in New York, we may not see rules to the end of the year, maybe longer, 18 months after legislation was signed. So what's the outlook for adult rec in Ohio?
So I'll start with that one. With the ballot initiative that's moving forward right now, there's an opportunity for the General Assembly, once these signatures are approved and adopted, to take on adult recreation. I think that there's a very slim chance that they would take the ballot initiative as is proposed and adopt it. Well, with that being said, if they don't, then it's going to go to citizens of Ohio to vote on, and the data that we have is showing that it would pass. So, recreation could be passed in November of 2022. And in your question of when would rules be established, we wrote in there, it's very detailed of how long it takes for the program to get up and running, and also a timeline of when licenses need to be issued and when the rules need to be written. Because that was something that we were conscientious about is, okay, you could write this law, you could have a program that's up and running, but the state could sit on it. Those are details that are in the bill as well. And who knows, there could be an opportunity to negotiate with the state because as there's this Senate Bill 261 and there's Representative Calendar's recreational bill and this ballot initiative. I don't know that the statewide who are running in 2022, who are Republicans, Jeff, as you mentioned, want to run against a cannabis ballot initiative. So there could be an opportunity for that. And, continuing to go back on the way Sarah introed, hopefully we're on the brink of something big here in Ohio.
Chris, anything to add to that?
No, I don't think so. It clearly voters want it. That's the wild card here. As I think traditionally, Republicans would say, well, I don't know if I want to have voters go to the polls when I'm up, because they're all going to be Democrats. That's not really the case. I don't know that that's necessarily the way it falls any longer. So it's going to be very, very interesting. Ohio surprised a lot of folks when it would manage to pass medical cannabis. It was the first time the legislature had gotten in front of a voter initiative. So it could happen again. It could move things along pretty quick if that were to happen.
Yeah, Erin?
I've been asking this question of every person I meet here. So we have this conversation with our landlord and the waitress and the Uber driver. And, I think there's a realization of the conservativeness of Ohio. And the people I was talking to today about it, all general consensus is it's not going to pass in the 2022 election cycle. But I also think that there is a huge demand for cannabis in the state, as we know. And I do think that there's a lot of cleanup work happening. And I do think that the legislators see it as a real opportunity for job creation and tax creation and to right the wrongs of incarceration. So, I'm hopeful that fall of 2022 is going to happen, but I guess a little bit to be seen.
Great.
Well, when MPP started our campaign in Illinois, sorry, Jeff, I just talked.
No, please.
When we started our campaign for legalization in Illinois, we expected about a 4-year turnaround. When we started, people said, yeah, good luck. You're not going to get a Midwestern legislature to adopt legalization. Within the first year, USA Today listed Illinois as one of the top 5 most likely to flip legalization. So, and it happened just like that. So while it does seem like this stuff is remote, you'd be surprised when the lane is open. Often people will take it. So I hope that's the case in Ohio.
Yeah, great. What do you think is sort of the main things that Ohio can learn from recent state legalization programs that can help its program be most successful? For the early states that embraced this, there was an open canvas, right? There was nothing to learn from. But now there's precedent. What can Ohio learn? What do you think is going to be most impactful as it sort of shapes the program?
I mean, I have very clear lenses out of California. Overtaxation only drives the illicit market. So, obviously, aspirational taxation rates across multiple categories of supply chain is an absolute disaster and will implode the market, as we're seeing play out today in California. So, hopefully Ohio can learn from that and not be too greedy with the tax rates and where they set them for adult use and really create a fair program that allows the regulated marketplace to thrive and not the illicit market.
I'd like to dovetail onto that. It's to keep in mind that it's often regulators, I feel like when they get into this, they start, thinking about, well, this business and that business, and they think in really small terms. We got to remember that the real opponent here is the massive underground market that is very successful and operates everywhere. They don't pay any taxes. They don't pay any licensing fees. And so lawmakers, I hope, will keep that in mind. And we will not see what unfortunately happened in California, which is taxes apparently that nobody even wants and can't figure out what they're going to pay for with them. And yet there they are. So keeping in mind that longer view. And one other thing, I'm going to make a pitch. That's keep in mind that eventually what we've had so far in legalization are states that live unto themselves, right? We have a balkanized system. Those days are numbered. eventually we're going to see legalization at the federal level. And so if you're thinking about designing your business plan right now in Ohio, you should imagine what that's going to look like as products go across state lines. So that's my pitch.
Got it. Sam, anything?
You know, Ohio is such an interesting state, and it's because we have these super majorities in the House and the Senate that sometimes they just only listen to themselves and they don't look outside of the states. And my recommendation would be that it needs education. They need to be educated, and it needs to be delivered in a not a release the floodgates kind of a way, but in a credible way that you know, that they're comfortable with. And I think that they're going to get there, and that they are inching their way there. But education and explaining, you know, why these components, like the social equity, a craft grower's license, things like that are important to the sustainability of this. And I think that's where you're going to find success.
All right, we've talked about a lot of topics, right? We've talked about designing the regulations, social equity elements, what we can learn from other states. We're nearing the end. I want to ask each of you if you have any final comments to share before I kind of go and move on with the outro today and conclude. All right.
I mean, I guess I'll go. I can go first. I'm just really excited for the market. I think it's going to be really interesting to see the next couple years play out. You know, that how a consumer loves marijuana. So I am really excited to see how this market can mature and how we can really expand both product categories that are allowed here, and then do it the right way with social equity, as we've talked so immensely about on this conversation today. So thank you for that. And I also learned a lot from Chris and Sam, so I appreciate the education as always. And thank you, Arcview, for being such a great champion for us.
Our pleasure. Sam or Chris?
Yeah, just briefly, you know, this has been great. This has been a lot of fun. Appreciate you know, the time, and you know, Ohio right now is it's a complicated place right now, and that there are complicated statutes and regulations. And if you're an investor, if you're looking to come into the market, I think that there, you know, you need good counsel, and you need to make sure you're prepared and understand, you know, what change of ownership structures look like. What are, you know, because you can't just come in and buy a dispensary. You know, there are certain limitations to that, and you know, I know that Arcview would be a great resource for any of those questions that any future investors or operators would want to have.
And I guess I would just say, look, it's hard to find a more exciting time. You know, we're at a point where we have massive support from voters. We've got lawmakers from both sides recognizing that this is just going to happen. We've got a vibrant market and industry, but it's not over yet. And there is still threat. There are still ways to step wrong. So very much appreciate Samuel's insight. And thank you, Jeff, for having me on and having us on. Aaron, your insight is also appreciated. So best to look to the folks who know the business where they are right now.
Well, Chris, I thank you for making yourself available at the very last moment. We expected Stephen, but we couldn't be more pleased with your insights today. So look, with that, let me thank all of you, our panelists, for your engagement and great insight. I'd also like to thank Hoodie Analytics for opening today and giving us some data around the Ohio market. And thank you, everybody who are our listeners, for filling out the survey. So let us just go through some of these future events before I close. On Thursday, December 2nd, this week, 1 p.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Eastern time, we'll have the third webinar in a 3-part series about infrastructure. The first was about diversity and inclusion. The second was about back office essentials. And this last one will be about infrastructure as it relates to retail. The Women's Inclusion Network, our very own membership organization that rallies behind gender equality, will have its final interactive mentorship workshop for 2021 on Monday, December 6th. as Gail Rand discusses exit strategy and what both investors and operators should think about in advance. And then, of course, join us Thursday, December 9th, for our next town hall discussion as we revisit New Jersey, the state of Bruce Springsteen, a timely conversation as they begin to accept applications to run legal cannabis. So with that, we'll close. Thank you, everybody, and please enjoy the rest of your day.